England's involvement in Indonesia's colonial history primarily occurred through its control of various territories in Southeast Asia, most notably Singapore and parts of the Malay Peninsula. England's interests in Indonesia were driven by its desire to expand its influence in the region, secure valuable trade routes, and gain access to the abundant natural resources found in the Indonesian archipelago. Although the British never fully colonized the entire region like the Dutch, their presence in Indonesia was significant during the 19th and early 20th centuries, particularly through trade, military presence, and diplomatic interventions. In the early 19th century, England's influence in Indonesia began with the British capture of the strategic island of Java from the Dutch during the Napoleonic Wars. The British briefly occupied Java from 1811 to 1816, following the Netherlands' defeat by Napoleon's forces. Under the leadership of Sir Stamford Raffles, the British attempted to reorganize the island's administration and economy. Raffles introduced reforms, such as the abolition of forced labor systems and an emphasis on free trade, but his rule was short-lived, as the Dutch regained control of Java after Napoleon's defeat in 1815. Despite losing Java, Britain remained active in the region, focusing on securing its interests through trade and diplomatic agreements. The British controlled Singapore, which became an important port and base for British trade in Southeast Asia. This control allowed the British to influence trade routes that connected Southeast Asia with China and India. Additionally, British colonial influence extended to the Malay Peninsula, with Britain establishing protectorates in regions like Malaya and North Borneo. These territories provided key resources like tin and rubber, which were vital to Britain's growing industrial economy. In addition to its commercial interests, Britain's presence in Indonesia involved military interventions, particularly in the 19th century, as part of its competition with other European powers, particularly the Dutch. The British made several attempts to undermine Dutch colonial dominance in the region, sometimes aligning with local rulers to challenge Dutch authority. However, by the late 19th century, Britain had largely recognized the Dutch as the dominant colonial power in Indonesia, and the two nations entered into agreements that formalized their spheres of influence in Southeast Asia. The Anglo-Dutch Treaty of 1824, for instance, officially divided British and Dutch colonial territories in the region, giving Britain control over Singapore and parts of the Malay Peninsula, while the Dutch retained control over Indonesia. Although Britain never established a full colonial presence in Indonesia, its involvement in the region helped shape Indonesia's history. British economic interests facilitated the growth of global trade routes that included Indonesia, and their military presence contributed to the shaping of regional politics. However, British influence waned as the Dutch strengthened their control over Indonesia. The colonial dominance of the Dutch, combined with the late arrival of other European powers, left a lasting impact on the political, social, and economic structures of Indonesia, which would only become fully apparent after World War II, when the country declared independence.